Would you notice a 16-year-old boy who got his first job?
Not for extra spending money, but to help feed his little sisters?
Or a mother who's in between jobs and sometimes goes to bed hungry so her kids can have dinner? Or a 14-year-old girl who signs up to every after-school activity, not to make friends, but just to get something to eat? Or a retiree who fell ill and had to choose
between getting medicine or groceries.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Mario fue pintor más de 30 años. Cuando me dijo que se le estaban olvidando las cosas, fue difícil. Un día me dijeron que pintara el marco del lado por dentro y pinté el lado de afuera.
Yo le diría a la gente que le diga a su familia lo que está pasando con él.
Si algo se nota diferente, podría ser Alzheimer. Es momento de hablarlo. Visita alz.org/nuestras historias para saber más. Un mensaje de the Alzheimer's Association y the Ad Council.
The Nebraska legislature will soon meet in special session and may consider a vote to raise consumer prices by imposing a sales tax on advertising. Nebraska's small businesses would be hit hardest, forcing them to raise prices, meaning we'd all pay more for the things we need. Contact your state senator and tell them no ad tax. Visit noadtaxnebraska.com to find your senator's contact information. That's noadtaxnebraska.com. A message from the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Whether you like.
Welcome in to the Corner 3, taking you around the arc of college basketball. From the NAAC to the Pac-12, the WCC to the SWAC, we cover it all now on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
Good Friday evening to you and yours, and thanks for dialing up 93.7 The Ticket, theticketfm.com. I am Austin Oerman. You hear me weekdays from 2 to 4 during On the Block with Eric Strickland. Just got off air with the guys DP and J for Old School. But this is my little ditty called The Corner 3. It comes your way Friday evenings, either here at 6 or at 7. Thanks for finding us on stream. Kansas City Royals are over the air right now, taking on the Detroit Tigers. Tigers are up right now in that one. We will certainly keep you abreast of the happenings from the Motor City. Yep, 2-1 Detroit right now. Salvador Perez hit his 20th homer of the year to get the Royals on the board. They still have 2 on and 1 out. Cole Reagans versus Tarek Skubal should be a fantastic pitching matchup. That game on Apple TV. But again, we are here on stream, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, as well as Allo channel 961. Really appreciate you again finding us there. If you have any thoughts on anything we're talking about, let me know at 402-464-5685. That is our Sartor Heyman Jewelers text line. They also do sponsor our live video streams. Leave a comment on any of them as well. It'll pop up. I'll see it and we'll get to it. Purpose of tonight's show, introduce you to the 4 new teams in Big Ten men's basketball. It was not official at Big Ten Media Days quite yet. Just a couple weeks early, but today, officially today, Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA are members of the Big Ten Conference. The Big 18 Conference technically right now. So that's where we stand, and this is how we're going to welcome them. We're going to go over their resumes, going to go over their history, let you know everything you need to know about them, their history, how they are historically, what they've been really the last 5 years, some of the notable coaches, the names you'll need to know, the top players in these schools' history, some notable games, how they fared against Nebraska and vice versa, and, just some fun miscellaneous stuff like that. So again, 402-464-5685 if you've got any thoughts. The first portion of this exercise, I thought it would be constructive to dive in first and foremost to the last times that the Big Ten has added schools to its conference roster. How did those schools fare before they got to the Big Ten? And then when they reached the Big Ten, how successful were they in the 5 years preceding and then the 3 years after joining the Big Ten Conference? And I could just go back to Nebraska, but before Nebraska, there was a previous edition. Granted, it was, 20 years before. That was Penn State. Penn State was really bouncing around. It was an independent for the longest time. It joined some East Coast conferences. Then in 82, 83, it joined the Atlantic 10. That kicked off just about a decade run in the A10 for Penn State under coaches Dick Harder and then also Bruce Parkhill. So 4 years in the A10 and 1 year of independent ball for Penn State before it joined the Big Ten. All of those years under Bruce Parkhill, Penn State only won fewer than 20 games one time in those preceding years. They were 13-14 in 87, 88, but 500 in A10 play. And then Penn State was really solid. 20-12, 25-9, 21-11 with a second round NCAA tournament appearance as a number 13 seed before going 21-8 as an independent the year before they joined the Big Ten. So no, Penn State did not come straight from the Atlantic 10 into the Big Ten in basketball. They took a year off, kind of at their independent roots where Penn State started and remained for most of its tenure. And then we get into the 3 years into the Big Ten for Penn State in 92 and 93. It was a bit of a rude awakening for Penn State. They go from 21-8 with no conference games as an independent to 7-20 the next year with a 2-16 record in Big Ten games. They allowed 71 points per game, only scored 62. Not a great showing. Not much better the next year. 13-14, 6-12 overall. Still allowed 71 points and scored just about 71 as well. But year 3 in the Big Ten, Penn State found its footing. Bruce Parkhill was still the coach. He goes 21-11 overall, 9-9 in Big Ten play. Did not qualify for the postseason. Bruce Parkhill, not brought back as head coach. Program gets turned over to Jerry Dunn. And then in year 4 in the Big Ten, which had been 95-96, Penn State goes 21-7, 12-6 in Big Ten play, earns a 5 seed in the NCAA tournament, gets ranked as high as number 9, finishes ranked 18th, but doesn't win a game in the NCAA tournament. So it definitely was not smooth sledding for Penn State, right? Going from the A10 and independent ball to the Big Ten. The 5 years previous, a combined record of 100 wins and 54 losses with an NCAA tournament appearance. Then the first 3 years in the Big Ten, 41-45 and 17-37 in conference play. That brings us to Nebraska. So much is made of what the Big Ten was like in football when Nebraska joined. But I think it's instructive to think back about who Nebraska was in basketball and what happened to the Huskers when they joined the Big Ten Conference. So in the Big 12 Conference, Nebraska went 89-71 in the 5 years before joining the Big Ten, and 30-50 in conference play is all that the Huskers managed. But that was all Doc Sadler. So if you go back, Nebraska's first year in the Big Ten was the 2011-2012 season. 2000, so that brings you 5 years back, the 2006-2007 season. Nebraska finished above 500 in 4 out of those 5 years under Doc Sadler, right? The first 5 of Doc Sadler's 6 years were spent in the Big 12 Conference. The problem was, even though Nebraska finished above 500, Nebraska didn't sniff the NCAA tournament and was abysmal in conference play. 6-10, 7-9, 8-8, 2-14, and 7-9 in conference play under Doc Sadler, ending out the Big 12 era. Nebraska was 15-18 in 2009-2010, the worst season that Doc Sadler, had in the Big 12. But Nebraska was 13-4 in non-conference games before going 2-14 in Big 12 conference play. The Big 12 that year, the 2009-2010 season, Kansas regular season champion Frank Martin, coach of the year down at Kansas State, and 7 teams made the NCAA tournament. Baylor, both Kansas schools, Missouri, Oklahoma State, Texas, and Texas A&M. 4 teams end up ranked in the AP poll. Kansas dominated the conference, 15-1 overall. K-State, Baylor, A&M all went 11-5. Kansas was ranked number 1 a lot of that year, ultimately ends up not winning that year's national championship, though. And Oklahoma ended up having to vacate wins from that 2009-2010 season. They finished 2 games ahead of Nebraska in 10th place in the Big 12. So Nebraska was kind of stuck in neutral, scuffling, especially in conference play under Doc Sadler, when they make the jump to the Big 10. Don't forget, Tim Miles wasn't the coach when Nebraska jumped to the Big 10. Doc Sadler got a year. So 2011-2012 is Nebraska's first year as a member of the Big 10 Conference. Huskers go 12-18 overall. They were 8-4 in non-conference, but 4-14 in Big 10 Conference play. Just to take a trip down memory lane here, that first year in the Big 10, the Big 10 rated out as, by simple rating system and strength of schedule, the toughest of the 33 conferences. You had a 3-way tie for regular season champ. Michigan, Michigan State, and Ohio State all ended up with the same record. Player of the year, Draymond Green. Coach of the year, Tom Izzo. And Big 10 tournament champion, Michigan State. 6 teams make the NCAA tournament that year: Indiana, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, and Wisconsin. Nebraska ends up in the cellar of the Big 10, tied with Penn State with a 4-14 record. Illinois and Minnesota were next worst at 6-12, and then you had Iowa and Northwestern with 8-10 records. So it was a solid Big 10 conference that Nebraska walked into. This was just after peak Ohio State, right? A couple years after peak Ohio State with Oden and Conley. You're getting to the Solinger, Evan Turner days at this point. Wisconsin was, rock steady, rock solid. Wisconsin, Indiana had just turned it on again and was about to take off for a couple years of really good play. Michigan State, steady as she comes under Tom Izzo. And even Michigan was in the midst of a basketball resurgence in those early to mid kind of 2010s. So Nebraska walked into a pretty tough conference. Not a lot going on at the upper level of championship contention, as has been the case for far too long for Nebraska in the Big 10 specifically, but still a really solid, really deep Big 10 conference. So the first 5 years before the Big 10 conference for Nebraska, 89-71, 30-50 overall under Doc Sadler. And then you flip the page into the Big 10 era. Nebraska goes 46-49 its first 3 years in the Big 10, 20-34 in conference games, but they make an NCAA tournament appearance. So Doc Sadler, 12-18 his first year and only year in the Big 10. Tim Miles goes 15-18 his first year at Nebraska, 10-5 in non-con, 5-13 in conference play. And then you have the magical 2013-2014 season. Nebraska goes 19-13 overall. Huskers go 11-7 in Big 10 conference play. And that's the last time they were above 500 in Big 10 play until the 2017-18 season. So it took another 4 years for Nebraska to go above 500 in conference play. If you scroll back through Nebraska history, there hasn't been a lot of success in conference. If we boil this down to the number of times that Nebraska men's basketball has gone not just even, but above 500 in conference play, it's only happened 3 times in the Big 10 era. 2013-14, 2017-18 was the high water mark at 13-5. And then this past season for Nebraska, the Huskers went 12-8 in Big 10 play. Before that season, that Nebraska went 11-7 in conference, the previous time Nebraska was above 500 in conference, you have to go back to the second to last year of Danny Nee. You have to go back to a different millennium, 1998, 1999. To be completely honest, yeah, things dipped a little bit, under Fred Hoiberg, right? Those first couple years, only 7 wins. That's a low water mark for the program, dating back a very long time. But what Doc Sadler did and what Tim Miles did at Nebraska really wasn't out of the ordinary for what Nebraska men's basketball was, even in the Big 12. So no, Nebraska didn't exactly acclimate very well to Big 10 men's basketball, but it also wasn't a departure from the norm. It was just business as usual, really, honestly, truly, for Nebraska in switching conferences. We're going to go to Rutgers next. There's not a lot to say about them switching conferences. The most important notes about Rutgers is that before they joined the Big 10, well, the Big 10 was their third conference in 3 years, if you look at it through one lens. And they also had 3 head coaches in that time frame. So Fred Hill was the coach of Rutgers, never went above 500. His last year kicks off the first 5 years of Rutgers outside of the Big Ten, 15-17, 5-13 in the Big East. And this was like the Big East when you think about it. Syracuse, Pitt, West Virginia, Nova, Marquette, Louisville, Notre Dame, Georgetown. That's the Big East. You had South Florida, Seton Hall in there, Cincinnati, UConn, St. John's, Rutgers, Providence, and DePaul. This was like big boy, Big East, biggest boy, Big East. Absolutely incredible basketball that I, to this day, have nostalgia rose-colored glasses for. That's the conference that Rutgers was competing in. They didn't finish last in the last year under Fred Hill. They finished third to last. 1 game better than Providence and 4 game better than poor sweet DePaul, who went only 8-23 that year. Things didn't get better for Rutgers the next 3 years in the Big East, 15-17, 14-18, 15-16. Just very middle of the road, but under a new coach, Mike Rice. And then in the move to the American Conference, you get Eddie Jordan hired on as head coach. Not a spectacular tenure for Eddie Jordan. He coaches only 2 years in Piscataway, combined record of 22-43, as well as a combined 7-29 record in conference play. Now, Eddie Jordan was the guy that brought Rutgers into the Big Ten. Oh, and I take that back. He did coach 2 years of Rutgers in the Big Ten. He was 17-47 overall and 3-33 in Big Ten conference play. The first 3 years in the Big Ten for Rutgers, their high water mark was 15-18 in Steve Peichel's first year, but 3-15 in conference play. Overall for Rutgers, since the first 3 years that Rutgers was in the Big Ten, 32-65 overall, so essentially a 1-3 winning percentage, and they went 6-48. 6-48 in Big Ten conference games their first 3 years in the conference. First 3 years for Penn State were 17-37. First 3 years for Nebraska were 20-34. But Rutgers walked in to a buzzsaw of a Big Ten. They did. 2014-15 Big Ten standings. Your regular season champion was Wisconsin. They go to the national championship game, knock off that undefeated Kentucky team. Frank Kaminsky, player of the year. Bo Ryan, Mark Turgeon, tie for coach of the year. 7 teams sent to the NCAA tournament. Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, Michigan State, Ohio State, Purdue, and Wisconsin. Don't forget, that was the year Nebraska was ranked in the preseason AP poll before the bottom really fell out. Rutgers finishes 2 games clear of Penn State for the worst record and the inverse record of Wisconsin at the top of the conference at 16-2. But of course, Rutgers didn't come to the Big Ten alone. Rutgers was joined by Maryland. And I remember at the time, and I think it's still true to this day, Maryland basketball joining the Big Ten felt like a little bit of a coup for the Big Ten. To get a school that takes basketball as seriously as Maryland does, it's not a blue blood. It would like to think of itself as a blue blood. It's not, but it's still a really good get. The 5 years before Maryland joined the Big Ten Conference, they were 102-66 overall, 43-41 in ACC games, and only qualified for one NCAA tournament. And that's part of why Gary Williams was let go. 24-9 in the 2009-10 season, 13-3 in the ACC. That's the year Duke goes on to win the ACC and the national championship game. Maryland finishes second behind the eventual national champion Duke Blue Devils in the ACC conference that year. They drop off to 19-14. Gary Williams is done after that. In comes Mark Turgeon. Turgeon goes 17-15, 25-13, and then 17-15 his first 3 years in College Park. And then it's Turgeon that brings Maryland into the Big Ten. And I still think this is probably the best that Maryland ever was under Mark Turgeon. We mentioned the Big Ten standings. Maryland marches into the Big Ten, finishes 2 games back of, again, eventual national runner-up Wisconsin, just 2 games clear of them. Maryland ends up ranked basically from week 4 of the season all the way through. They reach as high as number 8 second best team, second highest rated team in the conference behind Wisconsin. Those Maryland teams were fun, and I really thought Maryland was going to be, a power in the Big Ten to stay. They found a home in the middle right now. But here are some names from those first three Maryland teams. They come in with freshman Melo Trimble. Stud. Go back and watch the Melo Trimble mixtapes. 16 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists per game. Jake Layman, future NBA player, averaged 12 and 6, good 3-point shooter. Des Wells, Jared Nickens on that team as well. And then we turn the page to 2015-16 Maryland. 27-9 overall, finished third in the Big Ten. You get Melo Trimble back. Robert Carter comes in. Diamond Stone, stud freshman out of Milwaukee. He averages 12 points, 5 rebounds per game as the number 7 overall recruit. Maryland also adds Rashid Suleiman, transfer from Duke. And I wish DP was in here for this because Maryland, from what I gather, views Duke as a basketball rival. I don't know where that comes from. Yeah, they had some good matchups, in the early 2000s under Gary Williams and Coach K, Lefty Driesel and all that as well. But this is where I thought Maryland was going to turn the corner. Melo Trimble, Diamond Stone. Jake Layman was on his way out the door. And then 2016-17, Maryland makes its third straight NCAA tournament appearance. They were a 4 seed their first year in the Big Ten, 5 the second year. Do drop down to a 6 seed, and they get upset in the first round by Xavier. But you had third year of Melo Trimble. You had Justin Jackson come in as a freshman. Anthony Cowan really set the stage. Anthony Cowan Jr., who unfortunately kept Glenn Watson Jr. off of a lot of all Big Ten lists. Jackson and Cowan averaged 10 points apiece that year. Jackson goes 10, 6, and 1. Cowan goes 10, 4, and 4. Kevin Herter, a part of that freshman class as well. He's a future NBA guy for Maryland at that time. And DeMonte Dodd played a nice role for that team. The way Maryland came into the Big Ten, I really thought they were going to be kind of the outlier that comes into a new conference and dominates from the jump. No, Maryland didn't win the Big Ten conference. Some of the more established programs did. But I really thought Maryland, with its basketball history, its basketball tradition, would be up there with, steady as she comes, Wisconsin, and Tom Izzo, Michigan State at the top of the Big Ten conference for a while to come. That didn't happen under Maryland. After they go 12 and 6, have a little bit of a down year. They go 8 and 10, bounce back to win double-digit games, 13 and 7, make the NCAA tournament, 14 and 6 in conference play, miss it. Well, because of COVID, obviously in 2019-20. That Maryland team in 2019-20 got ranked as high as number 3 in the Big Ten Conference, 17 and 14 the next year. And then Turgeon gets 8 games before he's fired. In 21-22, Danny Manning takes over. The rest is history, and Kevin Willard takes over as head coach. He's gone 38 and 30 so far for the Terps. This is a good spot to take a break because when we get back, we're going to take a look at these other teams that are coming to the Big Ten. The 4 newcomers will start with, how do I have this drawn up? We'll start in Los Angeles. We'll start with UCLA. We'll start with USC, and definitely with UCLA. They are the headliner basketball edition. Husker fans, what do you need to know about the Bruins as they enter the Big Ten Conference? Are they in a position where they can take off from the get-go and find themselves at the top of the Big Ten under Mick Cronin? I'll give you the history and what you need to know about UCLA for this year, as well as USC, when we get back to the Corner 3.
With the Planet Fitness Black Card, you don't just get a great workout, you get a great perk out because your membership is packed with perks. For $1 down and $24.99 a month, you'll get perks like access to any of our 2,400 clean and spacious locations. Bring a friend anytime and both work out with tons of equipment that'll give you that big fitness energy. Relax in the Black Card spa and more. Work out and perk out with the PF Black Card. Join for just $1 down and $24.99 a month.
Hurry, this deal ends soon.
See Home Club for details.
This is how we do every day. We be grinding, and if you wanna come and text us,
if you love them enough to turn off your music and pretend like their music is your music.
This is Mommy's jam.
Then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Let's play it again.
Check today at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. That's doihaveprediabetes.org.
Wait, did they just say 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes? That's 33.33333% of adults. That means it could be me, my boss, or my boss's boss, or me, my favorite sister, or my other sister. That's 7 members of my 21-person romantic book club. Wait, the 1 in 3 could be me, my karaoke partner Carol, or my karaoke enemy Jeff. I'm going to take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
Sometimes I just cannot believe all the storms we've gone through here. I can only hope that we'll be able to leave this house to you one day, baby. You're our legacy.
Planning for these disasters will make sure we're safe, and is the best way to protect that legacy.
Protect your legacy. Visit ready.gov/plan for the tools and tips you need to start your emergency preparedness plan today. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
The Nebraska legislature will soon meet in special session and may consider a vote to raise consumer prices by imposing a sales tax on advertising. Nebraska's small businesses would be hit hardest, forcing them to raise prices, meaning we'd all pay more for the things we need. Contact your state senator and tell them no ad tax. Visit noadtaxnebraska.com to find your senator's contact information. That's noadtaxnebraska.com. A message from the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends, surprise parties, camps, birthdays. The same way you plan for the important moments, start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
On the Block with Strick and Austin.
If it was the Big Ten and the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC's idea to kick back to grow the game at lower levels, we wouldn't have these conversations. Right. But because the NCAA is asking them to do that, it feels like they're getting their wallet stolen, money taken out of it, and it's not their idea, so they're against it.
Yeah. Weekdays from 2 to 4 on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
This is the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket and theticketfm.com. I am Austin Oerman. Hear me here Friday nights here on the Corner 3, where we take a look around the world of college basketball. You can also find me 2 to 4 weekdays during On the Block with myself and Eric Strickland, as well as old school DP&J 4 to 6 weekdays. Thanks for hanging out here on stream. Really appreciate if you'd give this show a like, share it, whatever it is that you can do to spread the word, get it out there. Also follow wherever it is you get your podcast, right? Just search for the Corner 3 with Austin Oerman in case you ever miss an episode, anything you want to catch up on. That is the place to do it. Shows get posted pretty quickly to the podcast page whenever it is I'm done. It doesn't cost you anything. It means a lot to me. And you can always interact with the show, right? I have my Twitter handle I can put up here in the bottom corner. Thought I had that. Maybe it's going on the scroll as well. It's just at Austin_Oerman on Twitter. If you have any reaction to the show, always send it there if you're on Twitter. If not, our text line is open for you at 402-464-5685. All right, let's dive into a couple of the newcomers. Let's go the LA route, right? Let's get the glitz and glam and Hollywood out in the air first. UCLA, overall record 2,005 wins against 909 losses. That's a 688 winning percentage historically. Bruins find themselves 5th all-time in wins as well as win percentage. And they've been really good over the last 5 years here before joining the Big Ten. UCLA 115 and 53 in the last 5 years in Pac-12 play, as well as a conference mark of 68 and 29. Historically, there's no rival entering the conference, right? I don't think they even have a rival in the conference when it comes to the history. They walk in the door with the most national titles of any Big Ten school and the most Final Fours of any Big Ten school. The list is not really even close. UCLA given either 18 or 19 appearances, depending on how you count them. Next closest is Michigan State with 10, and then Michigan with either 6 or 8, depending on how you count the vacancies. UCLA obviously has the most titles of any college basketball school. They've got 11 of them. Next closest in the Big Ten is Indiana that claims 5 of them. Then it's Michigan State all the way down at 2. So UCLA walks in the door as the certifiable blue blood. And it backs it up with, obviously 11 national titles, 19 Final Fours. And then you just go down the list of players and names. You're starting with coaches, right? John Wooden. Boom, there's the list. Done. John Wooden, and, if the Big Ten's going to take accomplishments from the Pac-12 and claim them, hey, John Wooden walks in as the best coach in Big Ten basketball history. Move aside, Bobby Knight. You didn't win like John Wooden did. Then we get to a guy like Ben Howland for UCLA. Ben Howland, lest we forget, took UCLA to, back-to-back-to-back Final Fours, lost to Florida in the championship game in 05-06, lost him in the Final Four in 06-07, and then made it back to the Final Four in 2007-2008 before losing. Ben Howland was incredible at UCLA, 233 and 107 overall. AP Coach of the Year at Pitt before coming to UCLA. Took him, only missed the NCAA tournament 3 times, was a 4-time regular season champ, won the conference tournament twice. Made 3 straight Final Fours as well. So 233 and 107 for Ben Howland before he gets let go at UCLA. UCLA dipped all the way down to 25 and 10 his final year there. And of course, Ben Howland got picked up by Mississippi State, who Nebraska would see a handful of times there throughout the kind of the mid to late stage Tim Miles years. Some other interesting names that have coached UCLA: Steve Alford, right? Steve Alford, interesting. I knew him first for his ties at Nevada. You also think about his time at New Mexico, and he coached Iowa. Kind of weird to think of Steve Alford, Iowa basketball head coach. Steve Lavin coached at UCLA, not a place I associate him with necessarily. Jim Herrick was really good. He won the Bruins' most recent national title. They went 31-2 in the 94-95 season, won the national championship game. Walt Hazzard was around for a few years, but then you can't match the run the John Wooden had there, the Wizard of Westwood. And then we get to the players. Lou Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem, Bill Walton, Reggie Miller, probably the top 3 players in UCLA history if you combine pro and college accomplishments, but what they did in college was unbelievable. Jason Capono is a name we kind of laugh at in the NBA, but he was a baller from day one at UCLA for 4 years. Aaron Aflalo played there. And then the more recent guys like Kevin Love, Russell Westbrook, I say recent, they're mid to late 2000s. Love, Westbrook, Darren Collison helping take those teams to the Final Fours. You look at guys like Lukumba Amute on that team as well. Lonzo Ball was a stud for UCLA, right? I know Lonzo gets a bit of a bad rap because of his dad. Don't forget, Nebraska actually ended up playing that Lonzo Ball team down at the multi-team event, and I believe that was Orlando. Lonzo played 1 year in college, averaged 14.6 points, 6 rebounds, 7.5 assists per game, shot 55% overall, 41% from three-point range. Consensus All-American as a freshman, all Pac-12, Pac-12 Rookie of the Year, all that sort of good stuff. Lonzo was a baller. But another guy we don't talk about enough when it comes to UCLA, Pooh Richardson. 6'1", 180, went number 10 overall in the 1989 NBA draft. 12 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists per year. 3-time All Pac-12 player, Pac-12 All Freshman team, Pac-12 Rookie of the Year, All Pac-12 Tournament team in 87. Highly rated Parade All-American coming out of high school. And Pooh Richardson tore it up. Absolutely tore it up for 4 years at UCLA for his career, averaging those 12 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 7 assists. Didn't maybe go on to the NBA career expected given his success in college, but don't sleep on Pooh Richardson. And then you got a guy like Gail Goodrich from back in the day, one of the early pioneers of ball out there in Westwood. So a couple notable games, right? I mentioned the NCAA tournament losses to Florida in 2006 and 2007. Maybe we have to do a deep dive into Florida at some point and peak Billy Donovan with Joakim Noah, Corey Brewer, Al Horford, and that crew. Those are the ones that it took to beat your Kevin Love, Russell Westbrook, Darren Collison teams. And then, of course, Notre Dame, the team that snaps UCLA's 88-game win streak. So, Nebraska 1-4 against UCLA historically. They last played in 2016, the start of the 2016-17 season. They lost 82-71. And some other interesting Nebraska-UCLA connections. Obviously, the recent one is Berke Boyuktuncel, right? Transferring the Turkish player after 1 year at UCLA. He makes his way to Lincoln. And then Ernie Ziegler. Assistant coach Ernie Ziegler for Nebraska has some ties back to UCLA, and not just some ties. He was an assistant for Ben Howland when UCLA made it to those Final Fours in the national championship game. Ernie Ziegler has been there and been an assistant coach at some of the highest level of basketball that we've played this century. So there's what you need to know about UCLA, at least in terms of the history. Let's turn the page quick to USC. We think of USC as big brother, as dominant in that space, right? UCLA is kind of the other one. Absolutely not in basketball. Whereas UCLA has a 688 historic win percentage, USC is at 577. 1729 and 1267 overall. No national titles, only 2 Final Fours. UCLA boasts 36 conference titles. USC has 8, 7 of them regular season and 1 in the conference tournament. UCLA's made 52 NCAA tournament appearances with 115 wins. USC 21 appearances with 17 wins. Looking at USC over the last 5 years, they've had some more high-level NBA talent than they have in a little while, right? It's been sneaky good when it comes to the NBA draft, and we'll get to that here in just a little bit. But the last 5 years for USC, last year was rough under Andy Enfield, went only 15-18, 8-12 overall. Isaiah Collier struggled a little bit to find his role. Bronny James wasn't a big contributor for that team. They start the year ranked out number 21. They get as high as number 16. They really fall off in conference play. But it was a really good run for Andy Enfield at USC, all things considered. In the last 5 years, 3 of the 4 years ended in the NCAA tournament. 6 seed, 7 seed, and 10 seed. They made a run to the Elite Eight in the 2020 and 21 season. In the year they go 25-8. Overall, the last 5 years for USC, 110-54, 62 wins and 36 losses in conference play. It's been a solid, if not spectacular, program. It's put out some NBA talent in the recent years, like I just mentioned. You think about guys like Onyeka Okongwu, who you might not have heard if you weren't paying attention, but he was a pretty high NBA draft pick that I really thought he was going to be better. You have Evan Mobley, who just recently signed a new contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers. New age, kind of 3-and-D, floor spacing, power forward, and center. He was really good in college. OJ Mayo comes up, and we'll get to him when we get to the coach here in just a little bit. DeMar DeRozan went to college at USC. Nikola Vucevic, and don't sleep on Harold Miner. Went on and carved out a little bit of an NBA career for himself, a name that I think will fly under the radar. You think guys like Paul Westphal, longtime NBA great, went to USC. Some other interesting names, Robert Pack and Cliff Robinson from the 80s and 90s. You have Brian Scalabrine. That's a kind of a cult classic name. Jordan McLaughlin has carved out an NBA role for himself over the last 4 or 5 years. Rico, if you're listening, your boy Taj Gibson, USC product. Nikola Vucevic, a USC product. And then Swaggy P, Nick Young. Not a great basketball player, probably not even a good basketball player, but an icon in the space. Nick Young was pretty darn solid at USC. I'm trying to get his numbers pulled up here. Yeah, so from 2005 to 2007, he was a top 100 recruit averaged 15 points, 5 boards per game, shot 48% from the floor and 37% overall. Two-time All Pac-12 player. Nick Swaggy P. Young, a product of USC. But it's the coaches that interest me at USC. Andy Enfield, we mentioned, his story is interesting because he was the coach of Dunk City, Florida Gulf Coast, the 15 seed that knocked off number 2 seed Georgetown in the NCAA tournament the year before. Florida Gulf Coast was the team that opened up Pinnacle Bank Arena against Nebraska. So there's a little, 3 degrees of Andy Enfield tie to USC for Nebraska. Eric Musselman, the head coach, because Andy Enfield saw the writing on the wall, said, nope, you don't get the chance to fire me. I'm peacing out. I'm going to SMU. Andy Enfield, now the head coach at SMU, as they make the move to the ACC. So Eric Musselman comes from Arkansas. That was really the first domino that set off this year's coaching carousel, was Andy Enfield leaving USC for SMU, Eric Musselman returning to his West Coast roots, leaving the Arkansas job where he'd built them into a pretty consistent SEC contender, a very talented team year in, year out. He goes back west to USC. Then, of course, Arkansas and the Tyson family lure John Calipari away from Kentucky. Kentucky takes all these big swings at, Dan Hurley and Scott Drew. They whiff. They end up with alum Mark Pope as head coach. And I'm fascinated to see how that goes. But maybe the most interesting coach for my money at USC was Tim Floyd. Tim Floyd's record at USC was not atrocious necessarily. He started his career at UTEP, moved to Idaho, then went to New Orleans, where he won 127 games in 6 years, went to Iowa State in 4 years, won 81 games. He is one of only 2 coaches in Iowa State history to post 3 consecutive 20-win seasons. The other one's Fred Hoiberg. 3 straight appearances in the NCAA tournament at Iowa State before he makes the same jump that Fred Hoiberg would make not long after and goes to the Chicago Bulls. Tim Floyd was hired out of Iowa State to replace Phil Jackson. Not good. 13-37 in the lockout season, 17-65 the next year, 15-67 the year after that. And come year 4, Tim Floyd goes 4-21, resigns, is an assistant with the New Orleans Hornets before he gets another shot as a head coach at USC. Hired in 2005 after USC hired Rick Majerus. Longtime college basketball stalwart Rick Majerus had the USC job, wanted it for all of 5 days, and then said, no, I'm good. Just kidding. At that point, Rick Majerus had just gotten done at Utah. He was in a bit of an interim. He was in a lull looking for his next job. He accepts the USC job, then says, nope, just kidding. I'm good. And USC turns it over to Tim Floyd. Worked out decently well for them, right? On short notice, they go 17-12 overall. But there's scandal for Tim Floyd. Right after the 2009 season, all this stuff goes down. You have DeRozan Gibson declared for the NBA draft, and Floyd gets accused of improper benefits. He, gave some cash to an LA area event promoter who was one of the handlers for O.J. Mayo, one of the highest-rated recruits in college basketball history. I vaguely remember that recruiting saga going on there in the late 2000s, early 2010s. Tim Floyd gets hammered by the NCAA for the O.J. Mayo violations. And that kind of sent USC on a little bit of a tailspin, because Tim Floyd was pretty solid, all things considered, at USC. 17-13, 25-12, 21-12, 22-13. Then you turn it over to Kevin O'Neal, who's, right about 500 before the bottom falls out. Andy Enfield took him a couple of years to get his footing, and the rest is history. So not a terrible basketball history for USC. It just looks a little rough compared to UCLA, who's one of the winningest programs of all time in the regular season, owns the most championships of any program, most, close to the most Final Fours. USC's only been to 2 Final Fours, never won a national championship. And interestingly, USC's never been higher than a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, despite all the basketball talent in Los Angeles. Also, interestingly enough, they've never played Nebraska. Couple things I found interesting there. We'll go to break. When we get back, we'll wrap it up by taking a look at the 2, I don't say other schools, I mean no disrespect to them there. We'll take a look at Oregon and Washington. What do the Ducks and the Huskies bring to the table for Big Ten basketball? That's how we'll wrap up the Corner 3 for this week next.
You don't just get a great workout, you get a great perk out because your membership is packed with perks. For $1 down and $24.99 a month, you'll get perks like access to any of our 2,400 clean and spacious locations. Bring your friend anytime and both work out with tons of equipment that'll give you that big fitness energy. Relax in the Black Card Spa and more. Work out and perk out with the PF Black Card. Join for just $1 down and $24.99 a month.
Hurry, this deal ends soon.
See Home Club for details.
This is how we do every day. We be grinding, and if you wanna come and text us,
If you love them enough to turn off your music and pretend like their music is your music,
This is Mommy's jam.
then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Let's play it again.
Check today at nhtsa.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. That's doihaveprediabetes.org.
Wait, did they just say 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes? That's 33.33333% of adults. That means it could be me, my boss, or my boss's boss, or me, my favorite sister, or my other sister. That's 7 members of my 21-person romantic book club. Wait, the 1 in 3 could be me, my karaoke partner Carol, or my karaoke enemy Jeff. I'm going to take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
Sometimes I just cannot believe all the storms we've gone through here. I can only hope that we'll be able to leave this house to you one day, baby. You're our legacy.
Planning for these disasters will make sure we're safe and is the best way to protect that legacy.
Protect your legacy. Visit ready.gov/plan for the tools and tips you need to start your emergency preparedness plan today. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
The Nebraska legislature will soon meet in special session and may consider a vote to raise consumer prices by imposing a sales tax on advertising. Nebraska's small businesses would be hit hardest, forcing them to raise prices, meaning we'd all pay more for the things we need. Contact your state senator and tell them no ad tax. Visit noadtaxnebraska.com to find your senator's contact information. That's noadtaxnebraska.com. A message from the Nebraska Broadcasters Association and this station.
Back to the Corner 3 on 93.7 The Ticket. Here is your host, Austin Oerman.
I am Austin Oerman. We're taking you through the list of 4 new schools to join the Big Ten. It became official today. USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, all members of the Big Ten. It's been a good show so far. I told you how what would that be? The 4 most recent additions to the Big Ten before today, Penn State, Nebraska, Maryland, Rutgers have done in their transition to the conference. Told you about UCLA and USC. We'll tell you about the Ducks and Huskies right now. We'll start with Washington. It's a less exciting basketball program, at least as far as I see it. Not a whole lot of difference between these 2 programs, Oregon and Washington. We'll start with Washington. Career, record of 1,867 wins to 1,270 losses. And they've just been so very blah the last 5 years, which is a bummer because I love the purple and gold color scheme playing up at I believe it's the Alaska Airlines Center in Seattle. Washington with the Seattle hoop scene could be, and I would argue should be, so much better. Washington last made the NCAA tournament 6 seasons ago now, under Mike Hopkins, who's their current head coach. But the last 5 years, like I said, just been a lot of blah. 17-15, 16-16, 17-15, a really bad 5-21 season, and then a 15-17 season following up a 27-9 NCAA tournament appearance. That's a 70-74 overall record, 37-51 in Pac-12 play. No national championships, only one Final Four for Washington. 12 regular season championships, 3 conference tournament championships, 17 total NCAA tournament appearances. The Huskies are 19-18 in those appearances. Lorenzo Romar, probably the best coach for them. He was the coach from 2002, 2003, all the way up till the 2016-17 season. Made the NCAA tournament 6 times, I should say, in his time in Seattle. They were a 1 seed in the 2004-2005 season. That 2003 to 2006 run for Washington, probably the best in school history. With that 04-05 team that gets a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, 29-6 overall, 14-4 in the Pac-12. They finished second. They get a 1 seed in the West region, beat Montana and Pacific before ultimately falling to Louisville. Some of the names on that team are an absolute blast to tell you about. Nate Robinson. Yeah, Nate Doggy Dog, one of the shortest players in NBA history to win an NBA dunk contest. He's kind of fighting for his life right now in a lot of ways. So, thoughts and prayers for Nate Robinson. Check out his story. That year, hometown guy, right? He's from Seattle, averages 16, 4-4 for them. You have Trey Simmons, Bobby Jones, Jamal Williams, but Brandon Roy is a guy that I still think is one of the biggest what-if stories in NBA history. Brandon Roy was a stud for Washington, as well as the Portland Trail Blazers before knee injuries derailed him. And Will Conroy, one of the best players in Washington history, was the 6th leading scorer on that team, played the point, dished out 6 assists per game. He holds a lot of assist records on a per game basis, on a career basis, and even single game as well. 2005-2006, Washington brings Brandon Roy back. He leads the way with 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. And then the end of that run would have been 06-07. You have Spencer Hawes come in and Quincy Pondexter. That was a really fun player in college. Had a little bit of an NBA career, not a whole lot though, but Quincy Pondexter was a beast for the Washington Huskies. The other guys I think stand out when it comes to Washington in terms of the players in the history, you have Detlef Schrempf, former NBA guy, went to Washington. CJ Wilcox, one of the best players in Washington history, holds a lot of records again for them at the guard position. DeJounte Murray, current NBA star, played there. Maybe the biggest what if for Washington and its NBA prospects was Markelle Fultz, number 1 overall draft pick, stud his 1 year at Washington. You have Todd McCulloch in the post, Nigel Williams-Goss, kind of the proto Markelle Fultz. Terrence Ross balled out in the NBA for a while. Matisse Thybulle as well, rangy NBA defender. Left off of Team Australia, a little too one-dimensional, not enough shooting for him. Probably not the best player in Washington history, but maybe one of the coolest players in Washington history and in NBA history, Isaiah Thomas. Let Gus Johnson tell you the rest. Cold-blooded. That's the call. Gus Johnson on Isaiah Thomas. Cold-blooded is right. Isaiah Thomas was a stud in the NBA. Fantastic. That's Washington's most recent Pac-12 tournament title win. Actually, it's their only Pac-12 tournament title win. It was a walk-off. Just kidding. I was looking at my USC stats. One of their 3, but their most recent, the walk-off jumper, step-back jumper, cardiac Kemba-esque, but from further out. And, of course, Isaiah Thomas is a lefty. That brings us to Oregon. What do the Ducks add here to the Big Ten Conference? An overall record of 17-77 and 14-20. The last 5 years have been pretty solid under Dana Altman. Yes, that Dana Altman, former Creighton head coach. The last 5 years for Oregon. The overall record is 110-52, 62-34 in Pac-12 play. 1 national championship, 2 Final Fours, 14 combined conference championships, 18 NCAA tournament appearances, 27-17 in those appearances. Oregon, its 1 national championship, came back in 1939 in the first NCAA tournament ever played, like as we know it, in the semi-modern era. So Oregon got on the board first. They haven't gotten on the board since. Dana Altman, I mentioned, the head coach at Oregon, probably been the most successful. He got there in the 2010-2011 season, taking over for Ernie Kent, who was pretty successful himself. 5 NCAA tournament appearances for Ernie Kent up in Eugene. Dana Altman's done more than that. It took him till his 3rd year to make the NCAA tournament, made a Sweet 16 in year 3, round of 32 the next 2 years as a 7 and 8 seed. Made it all the way to the Elite 8 in 2015-16 with a 31-7 overall record. And then the next year, maybe the most crushing loss in Oregon history, and by far the most crushing loss for me in Oregon history. They lose 77-76 in the Final Four to North Carolina. Oregon made a run there as a 3 seed. The run included beating Iona, Rhode Island, Michigan. They beat Kansas by 14 points, and that's when I thought, oh man, Oregon might actually do this. And then, Jordan Bell forgets to box out. There's a free throw attempt that misses. Jordan Bell doesn't get a body. Carolina gets the rebound, puts it back in, and Oregon does not get a chance to play for the national championship. I have not yet forgiven Jordan Bell for that, and I'm not sure that I ever will. It's a classic college basketball game. That's the best Oregon basketball has been, in my lifetime. Jordan Bell was a stud, shot blocker, defensive presence, lob threat as well. Never really got it figured out in the NBA. Had a cup of tea with the Warriors, bounced around, hasn't been a factor in the NBA since. A couple other coaches before we get to other players. I mentioned Ernie Kent right before Dana Altman, and the always interesting Don Monson. If you don't know the name Don Monson, you should probably get familiar. Really good at Idaho. Kind of fell asleep at the wheel late in his Oregon tenure. Won the conference championship twice in the regular season, twice in the conference tournament. I feel like Oregon should have been more under Don Monson, right? In the late mid to late 80s and then into the early 90s. But Dana Altman, I think, is pretty clearly the best coach in Oregon men's basketball history. And all they're trying to do is push him out because he's boring. Only made 2 of the last 5 NCAA tournaments after running off 5 in a row and 6 out of 7 there. They've been a 12 seed, a 7 seed, and an 11 seed in their most recent appearances. But they haven't done a whole lot of winning. The 2021 team did end up making it to a Sweet 16, but that run got kickstarted because of the ever rare no contest versus VCU. It was the year after there was no tournament, right? The first tournament back from COVID. While VCU was still struggling with it. They were told they couldn't play because they didn't have enough numbers due to COVID. So 7 seed Oregon gets a pass to the second round of that year's NCAA tournament and knocks off number 2 Iowa. Yeah, that 2020-21 Iowa team, headlined by Luka Garza. You had Wieskamp, Bohannon, Frederick, and Connor McCaffrey. Keegan Murray was on that team. Patrick McCaffrey, Joe Toussaint, Tony Perkins, Chris Murray, right before he broke out a couple of years ago. And then, of course, Aaron Eulis was on that team. That was a deep Iowa team. That was a loaded Iowa team. Oregon held them to 8 of 25 three-point shooting. On the flip side, Oregon shot 11 of 25 from 3 that game. And there's a little bit of a series between Oregon and Nebraska as they make their way to the Big Ten. Nebraska leads Oregon 7-5 in the series. I didn't realize this until I was doing some research for the project a couple weeks ago. Nebraska actually beat Oregon up at the Quest Center in Omaha under Doc Sadler. I had no idea that game even happened. The other interesting note as it relates to Oregon for me personally is the coach Mike Krzyzewski versus Dylan Brooks saga that went down when Oregon beat Duke in the 2016 NCAA tournament. There was a whole kerfuffle. Coach K tried to do his, hey, I'm Coach K. I'm going to tell you that you're a better player than this, so you need to act better than this. And shocker, Dylan Brooks also went full villain mode, took umbrage with it. There was a bit of a kerfuffle, if you will, after the game. Other interesting players in Oregon history, Peyton Pritchard, probably going to get a new contract sooner than later with the Boston Celtics, the half-court artist. You think of a guy like Chris Boucher, not Bobby Boucher, not the water boy, but Chris Boucher was a really fun player in college. Chris Duarte transferred to Oregon, lit it up for a while. He's an interesting NBA role piece. But the guy that Nebraska is going to miss, and I think it's a good thing they will, N'Faly Dante. N'Faly Dante had a fascinating case for extra eligibility that got denied. He averaged 17 points and 9 rebounds for the Ducks a year ago. Player out of Mali, played his high school ball at Sunrise Christian Academy. He was a monster in the win against South Carolina, and then he just ran out of gas a little bit against Creighton, right? Oregon fights back from a 2-point, fights back, right? They were down a bucket at half to Creighton. Won the second half by those 2 points, send it to overtime, send it to double overtime, in fact. But they ran out of gas. They were not a very deep team. Played 8 players, but really only played 6 in that game. And N'Faly Dante, of the 50 minutes that got played at 6'11", 240, played 48 of 50 minutes, went 12 of 20 from the floor on his way to 28 points, had 20 rebounds as well. Jermaine Couisnard shot him out of the game a little bit, only 7 of 21 from 2, did hit 6 of 12 from long range on his way to 32 points. It was really that two-man effort, 32 from Couisnard and 28 from N'Faly Dante, that kept Oregon hanging around. Those two guys just ran out of steam late, and N'Faly Dante was not granted extra eligibility, so Nebraska will miss him. And I think that's a blessing in disguise for the rest of the conference, as I don't know how long Dana Altman has left in the tank, how much gas is left. I think he should be plenty safe at Oregon. But hey, there were rumblings last year, right? Dana called out the fans last time they were in the NIT for not showing up to support the team. There's a lot going on up there in Eugene. I think all the attention that Oregon football is grabbing ultimately will end up being pretty good for the men's basketball team. So as I look at these 4 teams as a whole, I think UCLA is the no doubt best addition to the Big Ten Conference for obvious reasons, the history, the prestige. They had a really great transfer class. They have some really good recent success. A Final Four run not too long ago. Second weekend runs pretty consistently. And I think Mick Cronin is built for the Big Ten. I think of Mick Cronin back in his Cincinnati days playing a real physical brawler, bruiser style of basketball. I think that's going to fit in pretty well in the Big Ten Conference. Add the history on top of that. I think it's a semi-legitimizing moment for the Big Ten in adding a blue blood like UCLA to the ranks. I'm going to step out, hopefully not too far on a limb, and say that UCLA gives the Big Ten a basketball blue blood. Michigan State's on the outside wanting to peek in. Purdue's not in that conversation. Ohio State, Michigan, far too up and down. And of course, Indiana. I don't know if you can lose blue blood status. We've had this discussion about Indiana for a while now. So maybe UCLA joins Indiana as blue bloods, but UCLA's a far superior blue blood to Indiana. I think they take over as the kings of Big Ten basketball historically, and I'm curious to see how that translates. Oregon, I think, is going to be a pain in the butt. I think going from Piscataway to Eugene is going to be a similar road trip, different directions. Long, athletic, defense first. Oregon will get out and run a little bit more. I'm curious to see if Rutgers opens things up with Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper in tow this year. Oregon's going to be a pain in the butt to play in football, in basketball, probably in baseball as well. I'm curious to see Dana getting more games in the Midwest and upper Midwest, just how much of a pain Oregon's going to be or if travel ends up getting them. Not too worried about USC year one under Eric Musselman. I don't think they're a threat to win the conference. Maybe they're a bubble team. I tend to think they're NIT with everything they A, lost, and B, re-added. I think they're a couple years away, but they're one to keep an eye on. And Washington, I think, is going to have a tough time. I think Washington could really dominate that Pacific Northwest area in basketball and in basketball recruiting. But coming in at a relative low point in the program, not a lot of momentum. They're just kind of stuck in neutral, spinning their tires right now. Yeah, they bring Wilhelm Breidenbach with them. Yay, woohoo. That's really all I can say Washington has going for it right now. So UCLA, absolutely fantastic get. Oregon should be an interesting kind of spice addition to the Big Ten. USC, untapped potential as always. I think they're a couple years away. And then Washington, we'll see. I think the Big Ten got deeper. I don't know if the Big Ten got better in its quest to end the title drought that it's on. Again, still dating all the way back to Tom Izzo and Mateen Cleaves in the year 2000. It's been a fun show. Thanks for walking with me through some new additions, history to the Big Ten. Again, I'd rank them UCLA, Oregon, USC, and Washington in terms of their usefulness to Big Ten basketball and how far they'll go in improving the product. Fascinated to see how those teams fit in. It was a little rocky for the last four editions, and Nebraska, Penn State, Rutgers, and Maryland had by far the easiest transition. If there's going to be a team that adjusts like Maryland, I would put a fair amount of money on that being UCLA. That'll do it for me here. That'll do it for us. Live content. Flip it back to the radio dial. You've got the Royals and the Tigers dueling right now on the airwaves. Game 2 of a 4-game set. Ticket weekends come your way starting tomorrow. Should be a great weekend. I'll be with you a little bit on Sunday. But until then, this has been the Corner 3. I'm Austin Oerman. Talk to you next time.